A few weeks ago I showed you the saddle tree of a medieval saddle that was built to fit Gossamer, and I'm excited to say that the final thing has turned up. Let me show you. So here it is. This is the beautiful leather covering over that well-fitted medieval wooden tree. You can see all of the work that's gone into it. It's got a very slightly padded seat, which is going to be interesting to try in comparison to my other medieval saddle, which has no padding whatsoever. This has got a little bit. It still has the ears, the front cantle, and these panels. These panels are modelled after a document we have from the medieval period, and we had a go at actually cutting into the surface of the leather and painting it in gold. So it's not real gold, it's gold paint. So we'll see how that wears over time. But maybe the cross-hatching will give a little bit more grip. It's nailed in place along the top here, along the ridges. So we'll see how that wears over time. And you can see underneath, you can see where the stuff has all been attached here with linen, and then there's this big pad underneath that goes against Gossamer's body. Now, these are the stirrups, and here's the first issue I have with these saddles. In a modern saddle, you run the stirrup up, sort of, and it holds itself away. In the medieval saddle, you haven't really got anywhere to put it. I've been toying with the idea of hooking it onto here, but the problem with that is this is going to get mud on it, and that will transfer the mud to the back of your saddle, which will transfer the mud to the back of your clothing, so that's probably not done. Maybe the stirrups were tied up here with something that I haven't got on this particular saddle yet, so maybe I need to make a modification. But maybe they were tied up there. That sort of makes sense. It will still get mud on the back of the saddle, but it keeps it out of the way when you're putting it on. And of course adjusting these stirrups is done from up here with a very hefty piece of leather, and we'll see how that feels against my leg. The saddle looks fantastic. The red leather makes it shine. We'll see how the cushioning does, but I need to try it because there's no point actually having a saddle without seeing how it performs over a period of time. I'm actually wearing sort of medieval kit. So this is a tunic. I've actually got a pouch here. I'm wearing modern trousers and modern boots, and I've got a t-shirt on underneath this. So I'm not reenacting as such. I'm not trying to do living history, but what I'm going to do is see how this interacts. This whole piece of kit interacts with this saddle as it would have done back then. One thing I've already noticed is if you have your phone, you need to keep your phone not in your pockets, because I know from previous experience that riding with phones and things in your pockets with this kind of saddle doesn't really work very well. It gets in the way. So having a pouch like this, late 15th century pouch, actually keeps the phone out of the way on your medieval saddle. That's to do with being modern, of course. They didn't have phones, of course, but they would have had stuff with them. And so a pouch being kept out of the way of all of this saddle actually makes quite a lot of sense. Right, I'm going to go and groom Gossamer, bring her back in and put this saddle on her. Good girl. Come on then. Good girl. Here you go. Good girl. Here, have some hay, sweetheart. Good girl. So this saddle is going to go on Gossamer shortly using a new girth, or rather an old girth. I've had a custom V-girth made. These are specific to the medieval period. This is custom made to fit the saddle and her, and we see these double girths in a lot of medieval illustrations of the time. So it's going to be interesting to see how this actually works with a proper girth. Before we used a modern one just for expediency and because I didn't have this girth made yet. We have the saddle ready to go, we have the girth, we have the horse eating lots of hay. So I'm going to get saddled up and then take her for a ride and see how it all comes together. Good girl. Right, let's get this on. The saddle is quite different to fit. It's taken me a while. A modern saddle, I'm very used to it. It's got one girth effectively. The medieval saddle has effectively got two. Well, not effectively. It does have two girths. They are joined underneath, but they have to be adjusted differently. You can see the double girths here. She's got her winter coat on and they're quite tight, so I might have to adjust those. But you can see the two girths do a different thing than a single modern girth, which would typically kind of go down about this position. So you've got this extra girth, and that's possibly because the saddle, you don't want the saddle to rock forwards onto her shoulder blades, and it's also got to be stopped from going backwards as well, because medieval riding is typically a bit more on the back of the horse, with the forehand of the horse with more freedom. But we'll see how it rides for half an hour, see how comfortable it is. I have a suspicion it might be quite comfortable once you're in it, but you can see how high up I've got to get just to get on this saddle. Good girl, yes. Gossamer is bigger than a medieval horse, and I've got to get on, but I've got to get myself over all of this and sitting down. And the stirrups are reasonably long because that's the style of medieval riding. So I am going to, as usual, use a mounting block because I've got to get my clothes up and over the cantle. So yeah, it's not as straightforward as you might think. It's been a little bit more complicated. Normally I'd saddle her up in a few minutes, but it's taken me 10 minutes or so, maybe a bit more, to get it organised. It's always the same with new equipment though. Hey, you want to get on with it, don't you? And this is, in a way, a form of practical archaeology. We're trying stuff out, and we'll see how it goes. Good girl, come on. Good girl, come on. Good girl. Stand. Good girl. Stand still. Good girl. That's better. Well, once you're in, it's very comfortable, but the process of getting the saddle on and getting on are, I suppose they're unfamiliar to me at the moment, but now I'm in it, it's very comfortable. You can see how the ears come right round me, and you can almost see how my clothing naturally drapes over the ears on this side. Anyway, it's sort of gone over. On this side it hasn't. It could sort of, you go, actually cover up quite nicely. So if you had a cloak, the saddle itself is close to me, but the clothing goes over the outside, fits around to keep me warm quite nicely. So I'm going to go for a ride now and see how it lasts. So, having ridden Gossamer for about half an hour in this saddle, I have to say, in summary, it's incredibly comfortable. It probably doesn't look very comfortable, and it's very high and it's all encompassing, but in fact it distributes your weight really nicely on the horse's back, and you feel very kind of at one with the horse. I rode for quite a long time. Gossamer was mucking about a little bit, she was full of energy, and the saddle kept me very securely on her back, which is the whole point of these saddles. These saddles are designed to fix you to the horse's back. It's meant to make it difficult for you to come out of the saddle or fall off the saddle. So it does its job very well. You feel very secure. You are leaning back a bit more though than compared to a modern jumping saddle. A modern general saddle or a jumping saddle is designed to lift you up and take you over the horse's withers a little bit. This is designed to allow you to sit deep and sit back. You naturally find your legs pressing against the front of this part of the saddle. Your back, I find, your back doesn't actually rest against this bit, but you have to move. If you move just slightly, you can effectively lock yourself into this saddle. So in armour or in soft kit, if you're just doing civilian riding, it is an incredibly secure seat. The downside of this kind of saddle is its upside as well, in that if you needed to get off the saddle, or if you want to get on and get off, it's actually a bit more hassle than a modern saddle. If you lean forwards, the top of this can hit you in the stomach. If you do have a problem with a horse, you actually can't get off very quickly. And as anybody that rides horses might know, sometimes you have to bail out of a saddle. In a medieval saddle, I think that would be almost impossible to do. And lastly, getting on and off is a bit of a palaver. And I can imagine the transition from this kind of saddle to a more modern design was probably in part for convenience, for the type of riding you were going to be doing, and for the simple fact that this front plate, whilst it protects you really well, it doesn't half get in the way when you want to jump or when your horse is messing around and lifting off the ground a little bit. Gossamer was messing around quite a lot today, and at no stage did I ever feel out of control, of course, but I was very fixed to her. I felt very solidly connected to her, and that was great, and it does its job incredibly well. As a war saddle and as a saddle for travelling long distances, I would say these are actually more comfortable than a modern day saddle.